Thanks for joining us live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Our guest today is City of South Miami Commissioner Brian Corey. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Michael.
Okay. So it's been a year now since you've been in office in the City of Pleasant Living, also known as the City of South Miami. So what's it been like?
Well, I have to say, I've obviously been familiar with the city through serving on boards and its staff, but I couldn't be happier with our heads of departments. And in my opinion, our city manager, Sherry Kamali, is one of the best in Miami-Dade County. So it's been a pleasure to work with them. And I've also had a huge amount of support from residents who have also volunteered their time to help with various initiatives. So it's really been just an incredible year. I've learned so much, but also, been able to get going on a lot of the things that I've wanted to do.
Some people don't quite understand city government. In this case, there are 5 elected commissioners, 5 elected officers. They each have an equal vote.
Right.
Even though theoretically there's more power to the mayor, but that's not the case in manager-run cities.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, the mayor mostly runs the meetings and also has obviously the title and prestige for welcoming people into the city, things like that.
So the city hires a city manager. The elected officials hire a city manager.
Yeah.
So the group, called the commission, sets forth policies and direction.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Correct. And we sponsor items, but even items that we sponsor are largely operated and taken by department heads and the city manager herself. So yeah, we provide a lot of direction, but a lot of the heavy lifting is still done by city staff.
So most people, in their home life, they have they have one partner, and maybe they run the household, or maybe it's equal input. But in this case, you have 4 other people, all right, that may not want the direction that you've offered. So how do you show the benefits of them voting for something that you want? How does that work?
Well, lucky for me, I grew up in a house with 5 people in it, 5 kids.
Perfect.
So I was used to, consensus, handling Discord, things like that. So it's been a bit of a natural fit for me. And honestly, even on the items that I've disagreed with commissioners, I felt very little tension in any sort of follow-ups. And that's really good. I just hope we're all able to be professional and continue to do our jobs. I've tried to give compelling arguments. I've lost some, especially early on, but nowadays I tend to have a better idea of how to make the concessions to make things go through.
So the concessions are, what do you have to do in your peace offering so that the other person who might not want that, they get something what they're looking for, so the citizens benefit.
Yeah, and try and do as much work as you can before you get up on the dais, because that can be very tense situations, especially with residents coming forward and giving their feedback. So it can be hard. A lot of people say it's kind of hard to think on the dais. So really, the more work you do off of it when you're bringing forward an item, I think the better.
So and so often, as we've seen with people when attorneys and lobbyists try to get something done, if they don't have input from the community, it is an uphill battle versus going out and talking with everybody, so that when it goes to the commission can deal with everybody seems to be okay with this, whatever it happens to be. So here we are, you're a year in. And how many years left do you have on this?
3.
Yeah, 3 years.
But less than 3 because it was a special election and I took over a couple months after.
An extraordinary moment in the city of South Miami, and how you were on some boards and you said, okay, I'm going to go do this. So what was it like when you said, when you vocalized for the first time, not internalized, but vocalized, I'm going to run and I'm going to win? What was that like?
Well, it was a whirlwind because obviously I had not been planning to do that. But fortunately for me, I was already attending all of the city commission meetings and I was already on a board. So I had a relatively good idea of what I was getting into. Now, I'd never run for office before, and that was intense. And of course, this was all with the backdrop of the pandemic. The only good thing about it was the special election was like 45, 60 days. So it was quick, but absolutely a whirlwind. And, I'm competitive. So I enjoyed putting my efforts in and getting the fruits of that labor. So it was a good experience, but definitely challenging.
And speaking of pandemic, what that did during that whole process, you had a baby.
I did.
How old's the baby? What's the name?
The baby, her name's Etta, and she is now approaching 3 months. So yeah, on top of having the new job and the pandemic happening and sort of coming to an end, hopefully, having the baby was also added on to that. But for me, I think it's great. And I think one of the reasons I was put on the commission was to add some of that diversity for people with young families. So having a baby just gave my third child just gave me that perspective back again to think of, what a resident's life is going to be like 50, 60 years from now, as opposed to,
Right.
now.
So what are some of the things that you've seen happen that you either participated in or that have already happened? What does it look like for the city in the next year or two?
Well, I think some major accomplishments that have happened this year, obviously just executing our capital improvements projects from, South Miami Parks, playgrounds almost built there, various other projects. Recently, we were able to buy back the lease on the garage in the downtown.
Is that a done deal?
Done deal.
Is that which part? The whole lease? The whole building?
Yeah.
The whole building?
No, sorry, not the ground floor retail,
Okay.
but the whole building. Really, the part that we want to run. We want to make the parking there more pleasant, more efficient, and activate that space. But it's just the beginning of what we're starting to do in our urban core, which we have to work on branding that as well, because everyone calls it something different. Urban core, town center, however. But we're doing so much work there, and we have so much planned there. That I'm really excited for. But this is such a big thing for us to get started with, is to get that garage back in our hands and to improve it.
So, and what are some of the basic things that, if you could tell us some things that would make a big difference to the driver and somebody who wants to park in the city of South Miami, with that being in your hands?
With the garage.
Yes.
So first of all, we want to paint it a lighter color. It's kind of dark in there, add lighting. A lot of people have said in the past that they didn't necessarily feel secure there. And clean up some of the corner spaces, as well as there are some thoughts on how to potentially activate the roof. But, this is so early on. Really, we've got to do sort of the basic information. And now, ever since I came on board, I'd love to take credit for it, but it happened almost immediately after I came on board. Our communication with residents has never been better with our SOMI newsletter. On top of everything, I can tell prior to me coming on, I was following the meetings through the traditional website, going through the agenda. Very, very difficult to do. SOMI newsletter and our social media outreach and our email outreach is just, it is everything that you need to know.
So with the SOMI newsletter, is that email or printed?
It's email.
So Pinecrest did a survey, one of the commissioners there, and they mentioned the top 4 things. And all of them meant to the consumer, the resident, the taxpayer, we want to be connected.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way they were asking, what's the best way that we can connect with you? All right. And I'm not going to tell you the result because it really doesn't matter, because everybody was a little bit different. But what people were crying out for is, how do I get connected when I want to be connected? And how can I disconnect without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah. And I think so. I think the newsletter is good for that, because email, obviously, you can opt out of. Now, we do have perhaps an older population that may not be as keen on the email. And I guess we have considered the idea of print in the future. But talking about resident engagement, this upcoming November election, the very first in a very long time, where South Miami residents will vote for commission and mayor in November, is going to bring, in my opinion, 20 to 30% more city engagement.
I certainly hope so, because they have additional reasons to go.
Right.
And I think that's what we're looking for. It's, for instance, if there's only one item on the ballot, no one's going to show up. Right. Right. Just the haters or the lovers, the people in between. They're not. They won't do that. So this is the first time, I think, in a long time. If I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was when Barack Obama was running. All right, huge turnout then. This is a real test for people here in the city of South Miami, which they all voted to move. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't know what percentage, but this is the traditional time for people to vote. And when there's a lot of conversation everywhere about it, and hopefully people will be more and more involved and be able to vote for their candidate of their choice. Put aside candidates, are there going to be any issues on the ballot?
We're discussing that now, and we've sent it to the city attorney to write up. I think there's maybe even 5 or 8 of them that we've sent, but really until they get formalized and we vote on it, we won't know what'll go to referendum. But there will be items. I mean, I hope we have to agree to it.
And so certainly and although it's months away, the city in the newsletter, they're going to send out, here are the items that are coming up. Please look at it. Please study it, right? Because that's the worst part. You go to the ballot and you go, I don't know, there's 50 lines in it.
Yeah.
And that's not the time to be reading it for the first time.
Of course. And it'll be a little bit more exhaustive being a November election. It'll be pretty far down the list of things you're voting for. You'll be inundated with, all the other races that are going on. That being said, and I think this goes for our commission meetings as well, our residents have always been incredibly informed on what's going on. And we know at those meetings when people are for or against something. It's either a very quiet meeting and people are for it, or there's a lot of people there, and you've got to take that into consideration with your vote.
So let's talk about that for a moment. You go up there and you're anticipating whatever it is, all right? And it turns out it's not that way. It's the other way.
Yeah.
All right. Most probably the ones that are against it bring the most grief. The other ones you go, whew, I missed it. So what is that like, dealing with people that are really passionate and expressive, and the one by one they're coming up? And they get 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Right? And they got up there, and now you've listened to the 5th one or 10th one, and everybody wants their moment, which they deserve, right? What is it like internally when you're listening and you hear them?
Well, it definitely can change your mind, and I think it's okay to change your mind on the dais. The only thing is, and we get our chance in commission comments as well after the public comments, is a lot of times things can spiral off as like misinformation. And if that's the case, if you're able to, appeal to the audience to try and tell them perhaps you've misunderstood this or heard this wrong, in that case, I think it's probably fine to stick to your guns. But part of our job is to listen to the residents. So yes. We have to take our own bias out of that at times.
So when you're sitting there and you're talking, are you talking to the people on each side of you, or are you talking to people that are out there, or both? How does that work?
I would say both. I mean, we have a session of the meeting that's designed for discussion. Now, again, it can be really hard to do. And we have to use that because we have our sunshine laws where we can't talk to each other outside of the meetings. But it can be very hard in that public forum to have candid conversations with people to the right or left of you.
You mean like right here?
Right.
But if they were at the end, it might be easier.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the most important thing for you to do would be to, like, even on the smaller items, express your opinion on it so that your peers get a better sense of where your head is with things as well. Because otherwise, if you just stay quiet and vote, sometimes you can throw people off, or you don't really get your side of the argument across.
So when that each commission gets their opportunity to speak, at that point, there are 3 things: yes, no, or I'm not sure. Right?
Yeah.
And so part of the job of people up there that are elected is to get other people up there to go with what they think is the right way to do that. When you mentioned sometimes you can change people's minds, that's what it's really carved out to do, right? Is to bring up a point that maybe they knew or didn't know. Has there been a time where you just knew sitting there and you argued your point, all right, for good or bad, whatever it happens to be, that they changed your mind because of the evidence that was brought forth at that commission meeting?
By the other commissioners and the mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. Because, like I said before, we don't get to speak with each other off the dais. And sometimes they're sponsoring an item. And when they're sponsoring an item, you might read it and maybe it can be out of context. You don't even know what problem it's addressing. So when they come up forward and they tell you, here was the problem, this is why I created this, it makes a little bit more sense. One of the things that I always try to focus on is, not create too much legislation. Don't create for solutions for things that don't have problems. I worry about that because it has long-term ramifications. That being said, if they can explain the problem better to you, it's definitely convincing.
And we know sometimes just the intonation of the conversation and people listening and watching can change your mind. We had a vendor said, I haven't sent you a bill in 6 months. My interpretation was they were going to give me this gigantic bill for 6 months worth of work. That was my interpretation. That wasn't at all. I haven't billed you and I'm not going to. And I haven't sent you a bill because I'm doing it for you at no charge. Well, my immediate interpretation was, why did they wait so long? I can't stand that. They should be sending me a monthly bill. And I'm having this whole internal conversation. But I did say, well, what do you mean? And I think that's important when you're up there to figure out what the other person means.
Right.
So how frequently do you, when you're doing these things, are they like, you realize that it can't be even Steven, but you can see somebody's starting to go with you, or you're about to go with them. What do you do to try to get them to pull the trigger, if you will?
Well, I always have, at least lately, early on, I was really thrown aback by different votes. I thought people were going one way or they're going the other. As I got to know people a little bit better up there and their decision-making process, I often feel comfortable in it. But that's why I think I'll always try, if I don't feel like the argument's been persuasive enough one way or the other, just to make sure that I have my last word in there, because it's an awful feeling. I've had it early on when the vote doesn't go your way and you thought it was, and you just didn't give that last word, because you just have to make sure. After every item's brought up, it goes to discussion amongst everybody. So as soon as that's closed up, the vote happens, and then you can call the vote back. But,
So we know that one person can make a difference, and whether,
Oh, yeah.
where you're a resident or an elected official or an influencer, speak your mind, right? Because you never know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
Right?
And I would say that to residents as well. You might see something and say, oh, this is going to go through, or, oh, they'll never vote this through, but you never know that. And there's so many ways you can be influential. If you can't make the meeting in person, you can do it on Zoom. If you can't make the meeting in Zoom, you can send an email. If you can't do either of those, you can call a commissioner at any time. Setting up meetings at City Hall with commissioners, or setting up meetings individually with commissioners because they can't necessarily meet together, or the mayor can be very influential as well. In a small city like ours, that's really one of the reasons, you're paying slightly higher taxes. You get this representation that's more of an intimate form of
Yes.
representation.
And people can find out when the next meetings are. They can find videos. They go to City
Yeah.
South Miami, look it up, and you can go there. You
And-
can watch old videos, just about everything.
And I'll tell you, everyone in the city through my campaign has my cell phone number. So, and they all tell me as well, when they call commissioners, the commissioners pick up too. So, think about that in any other city or the county or anything. It'd be very hard for them to do
Yes.
that. We're able to do that based on our size.
That's wonderful. So tell us about some other things that are going to happen in the next 6 months to a year.
Well, the capital, we're going through budgetary discussions over the summer, but a lot of the capital improvement projects that were for last year are getting finished up during this year. Obviously, one of the biggest things, Sunset Place is still in the planning phases and getting ready to come to commission. I'm hoping that happens within the next 6 months to a year, that they do approach us. That's going to be a very pivotal thing in the downtown area.
So for people that don't remember or don't want to remember, it was approved for whatever it was. Then the developer decided to bail. Somebody new came and bought it. The property's worth probably twice what they paid for it at this point, because you never know what's going to happen. So the new owner is coming back with some changes they would like.
Mhm.
When do you think that would be for the commission?
My hopes, and again, I have no additional information on this, but I do have a good sense of how long something like this gets planned. So I'm hoping within the next 6 months to a year, we'll see what the new plans are, and that the commission will come together and we'll all work with them. A 12-acre property in the middle of our urban centers is important.
And especially nowadays with the changes that have happened so rapidly, right? I know you say, well, it was only 2 years. Actually, it's been 20 plus 2, right? But it's certainly changed. And so we look at this development, and I have not seen it. I haven't spoken to anybody there, but they're going to do something that I think is really viable, all right? And that's not just for today, but for the next 10 and 20 years. Let's talk about the related project,
Mhm.
which is just going to be a few blocks. When does that start in earnest?
Well, it's already gone through our initial phases with the ERPB, which is right after it's been approved. So I'd imagine they just need to go through some more permitting phases before breaking ground. But that
Why don't you tell us what it's going to be?
well, it's a mixed income project with some Section 8 housing along with market rate housing, and it's going to absolutely be crucial to that neighborhood and the city and the region, because there will also be residents from Miami-Dade County, generally speaking, and being that we're in the middle of a housing crisis, it couldn't come fast enough, but we do have to go through the standard procedures to make it come in there.
And how many acres is that?
Well, it's 2 parcels of land. It's basically being built over currently the South Miami Gardens properties, the 2 parcels that are there. I don't recall the exact acreage on it, but it is going to, like I said, it's going to be mixed income. It's going to have ground floor retail as well. Yeah.
So those 50-year-old townhouses can be torn down.
Yes.
All right. New building's going to go up. It's going to be housing all different levels there. It's going to put a lot of feet on the ground. It's going to so dramatically improve
Yes.
the area of South Miami that needs it the most. All right. And we say, gee, reminded people say, oh, the movie star, look, in the last 2 years. I said, you forgot the first 40. So over here, the people have been yelling and screaming, let's make it better. So it's finally happening. And so we're so delighted. All right. And so but certainly within a year, there's going to be a shovel in the ground, hopefully.
Yeah. And, that has to go through the permitting processes and things like that. And you never know what you're going to run into, but we're certainly going to do everything we can within the city to help move that project along. It's obviously much needed. It's obviously transformative for the area. So, we're definitely not going to get in the way there.
Okay. So what are some other things that the city's working on?
Well, the city,
yes.
Not projects that are coming
correct.
in.
Yep.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're going into the budgetary discussions now. Some of the other CIP items that have come through, actually one of the most interesting ones, the weekly recycling already happened. It's been very exciting for people. We have the South Miami Park project, which is the playground that I mentioned that's coming in there. We're hoping, we're working with the county to get a bathroom in place there too. That's a 10-acre park that's been underdeveloped for quite some time. We obviously just had new sculptures come into Dante Facel, and a new sign there for the Columbia Sculpture Gardens. That was a very exciting event and kind of putting our city on the map internationally, even for the praise that's come to that park.
It's an interesting thing being in the media business. You understand a whole bunch of pixels, although they're only little, they make up an image.
Yeah.
All right. And so it is with South Miami. All these little images, all these little pixels for the roundabouts and the street signs, and all of a sudden, okay, you have over here, you have the park that's being worked on. All of a sudden, you look at it, and you go, oh my goodness, the details that are now happening elevated from like being underrated.
Yeah.
To the city cares about the way it looks, and it's certainly a proud moment for everybody that's here to be able to look. And it's sort of like the crown molding in the house. You go, wow.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what's happening here.
I forgot to mention, because when I went campaigning, obviously the number one issue was always traffic. And while I was campaigning, I was mentioning that we had a traffic study that was on hold. That traffic study was conducted. In last meeting, we just approved contracts to put in 6 different speed bumps in various locations, many of them in the southern parts of the city. But we're also looking at strategies for traffic mitigation throughout. So I think that's
even at
probably
the north end.
Not at the north end where I live. There was a lot of appeal for it there, but it just turns out there's not as much volume. The incidents might still be there, but one of the qualifiers was volume. Yes. So South obviously is going to have, and that's an important thing, I think, because it's going to get denser, right? If density is going to occur in South Miami, it's going to occur in the southern part of South Miami. So I think this traffic mitigation that we're doing now is going to be very important for that.
We know and we have 2 minutes left. We know there's a couple other privately owned projects that are going to go on 62nd and US 1, and then the Winn-Dixie property. So it looks like within the next couple of years, there are going to be some decisions and some movement on that. It's nice to see the pandemic, even though it seems to be still out there, right? People are getting, I don't know if you get over it, but we're learning to live with it. And it's nice to see people walking up and down the streets. And Grant and I wish you lots of good health, and we hope you continue enjoying what you're doing. You got 3 more years left, and November's around the corner. It will certainly be a new day for the people of South Miami to exercise their right to vote. And I hope people go out and study the candidates, study the issues, and vote for the ones they want.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me here and all of your well wishes. And I'm happy to come back soon. I know you guys are gonna have a busy time, campaign season coming up. Fortunately for me, I'm off the hook this year, but I'll be right back on it in 2.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Are we ready over there? Okay, folks. Hey, thanks for joining us again. Our guest is Brian Corey, City of South Miami City Commissioner. Have a great day, folks.
Thank you.